Oh, hey there. I finally figured out how to astral project myself into the digital world. Okay, sorry I lied. This is just a video playing on a plane. I'm actually just standing here in front of my blue screen. Okay, it's a green screen. Whenever I see mixed media live action footage in CG environments, unless it's like perfectly matched and ultra realistic, it always just winds up looking a little bit cheesy. But I thought, why not lean into that cheesiness and try to highlight the mismatch between the two mediums? What if I try to recreate the look of old 90s full motion video games, or FMV games? Before we get to that, we need to first import the footage into Unreal. Here's the process I wound up with. First, we need some green screen footage. I started out by testing with some stock footage of Jerma that he made available to use. We'll need to mask out the green. I used the Ultra key effect in Premiere and then just messed around with the dials until it looked good.
Nobody does it as good as just the great.
Since we're going for kind of cheesy, this doesn't need to be perfect. In fact, it might look a little bit better if it's a little sloppy. In Premiere, I can export all these frames as a sequence of PNGs. I also exported the audio as a WAV file since we need that to time stuff later. Okay, now we need to set up a bunch of stuff in Unreal, and this bit's gonna get a bit tutorial-y, so if you're just watching this because you're bored, just check your phone for a bit. First, we need an image media source. In here, we link to our sequence of PNGs and set the frame rate. Next, we need a media player. Click this to create a media texture asset as well. The media player plays the media, and the media texture displays that media as a texture. I also created a new masked material, and here we just take that media texture and run the color into the base color and the alpha into the opacity mask. Now we can put a plane in the world and put our media material on it, and, well, nothing. We actually need to be playing the media for it to do anything. So let's create a new level sequence. Add a media track and put our media source in, and now it displays on the timeline, and still there's nothing. There's one more step. This one's secret. It's a secret step. You also have to right-click Properties and then set the media texture to the one that we created. And finally, we now have our media playing on the plane in our 3D environment in Unreal Engine. So you can get off your phone now. I also put the WAV file onto the timeline so that we can time out shots or make YTPs. Really, you should just use a plane for this, but you can put it on whatever model you want. Here's what Jerma looks like when he's on a cone, or a sphere, or a cylinder. We can also edit the values of the material itself to change how it responds to light. Here's what a metal Jerma looks like. I actually think the green screen footage just playing on a plane in 3D space looks pretty good, although the illusion starts to break if you look at it from an angle. Like, yeah, hi. Yeah, that's not right. Okay, wait, all right. Yeah. I made this little scene to test out how it looks with camera movements. Whenever I do a jump cut, I rotate the plane to match the direction of the camera.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, yes, of course. Yes. You're in trouble. You're in trouble. Yes, get him. Yes, yes, kill him. Kill him. Why am I hunching over?
You may have noticed that the footage of Jerma there looks a little bit pixelated and crunchy. That was my first attempt at making it look like low-quality FMV footage, but we can do way better than that. Let's look at some examples for reference.
But there is something completely different that's invading the video emporium these days, and it's a result of the recent marriage between the laser and computer technology. It's pretty amazing to see, so if you're game, let's coin up.
FMV was a technology that developed alongside the standard pixel art graphics or 3D vector graphics that video games use. The idea was, instead of having the computer render out art, let's just play video files. It would look way more realistic than anything we were capable of rendering. One of the first examples of this was the arcade game Dragon's Lair back in 1983, which used laser discs to show fully animated cutscenes.
We're in the entertainment business, and no one had really come out with anything new, and people were sick of computer graphic games that didn't have appeal. They're tired of it. They wanted something a little more real.
The art looked leagues above anything else in arcades. However, the gameplay was just press the button at the right time, which is what we now call QuickTime events. Later, the fighting game Mortal Kombat would use pictures of actors and then digitize them into sprites. Full motion video required a lot more storage, so it only really worked in an arcade setting. It would take until the 90s for this technology to finally hit home consoles with the CD-ROM. The first console was the CDI that partnered with Nintendo to make this.
Nice of the princess to invite us over for a picnic, eh, Luigi?
Gee, it sure is boring around here.
My boy.
It flopped for some reason. Sega responded with their own CD player, the Sega CD.
Hey! You still don't have a Sega CD? Huh? What are you waiting for, Nintendo to make one? You have seen the games, right? Wrong answer, man. Show them!
A bunch of FMV games were produced for the Sega CD, including Ground Zero Texas and Night Trap. Both Night Trap and Mortal Kombat were such a leap into realism that they were the subject of a 1993 Senate committee hearing on violent video games.
I said earlier that I thought that violence was gratuitous and offensive and ought not to be available to people in our society.
This was the origin of the ESRB rating system.
There are 3 or 4 generations of video games. There's Pong, there's things like Space Invaders, there's Nintendo with cartoon figures. We're into the next stage right now, which is Night Trap type games, and there's a new stage after this, which is the combining of this with virtual reality devices. I mean, imagine this game with iPhones that bring sense around.
Wait, how did he predict iPhones? Unfortunately, FMV Games didn't really pan out, mostly because the format really restricts gameplay. It was mostly seen as a gimmick rather than the next step in graphics. However, they did linger on for a while in PC point-and-click adventure games like Phantasmagoria or Harvester. It's hard to accurately recreate what FMV footage looks like since there were so many different eras of FMV games with varying degrees of quality. However, the main theme among all of them is compression. Video requires a ton of data, so how do we compress video to get it to fit into these games? The first method is just using a low resolution. In a lot of these games, you can see the pixelated edges on the masks of the characters. Another space-saving trick is reducing the color space. The Sega CD itself only had 256 colors to work with, and only 64 on screen at any given time. So a lot of the footage had to be reduced down to a small amount of colors and then dithered to make the shading look a bit nicer. I decided to recreate some of these compression effects in my sequence of PNGs. I also compressed the audio a little bit too. Here's what the results look like.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Super Mario. We've made a lot of jokes here today. We've had a lot of fun. And I'm an actor. But let me just be the first to tell you that, it's not fun. What is not totally Yahoo? Drugs and alcohol. Stay away from them. If somebody tries to pressure you into drinking or smoking, tell them with the hardest of hearts, no, I don't need to do that. We can get back to the playing in games now. But I wanted to make sure that that was a big Yahoo. Yahoo! Yahoo!
Okay, that last one was just for fun, but it could make a good glitch effect. I posted this to my socials, and judging on the response, the best looking result seems to be dithering, and I agree. I went with a pretty simple form of dithering for this though. It's just adding a little bit of noise before reducing the color space with a posterizing filter in Premiere. However, we can recreate what dithering looked like on the Sega CD by using a pattern dither. I wrote this little FFMPEG script to auto-dither all of my PNGs and place them in a new folder. I just have to navigate to my folder and run this. This first line just sets up a new folder for all the dithering we're going to make. Step 2 generates a palette based on a seed image, so I created this little seed image of one of the frames just with a black background. I had better results than when it was fully transparent. Step 3 scales down the footage to 420p, does a little bit of color correction, and then applies the dither pattern based on that palette that we generated, and then puts all the resulting frames into that folder. I'll leave this script in the description if you want to try it out. Another compression technique is limiting the frame rate. I tried out rendering the footage at 12 FPS, which does look pretty good, but to me the best balance was just keeping everything at 24 FPS. This still isn't creepy enough though. This is the Halloween Jam to Go special. It needs to be creepy. A while back, there was a trend of TikTokers making creepy videos that were inspired by FMV Games. One of the big creators was Molly Moon, who used a different compression technique. In this video, she's only using a very limited amount of frames, and for the talking and blinking, she uses smaller cutouts of her face. We can recreate this by doing movements and then freezing in place and then talk and blink. Then just do a bunch of hand animating. Hello, traveler. Welcome to my shop. Would you like to purchase anything? That item? Are you sure? Well, I have to sell it to you if you want it. But do you have... It doesn't seem like you have enough money. Come back when you're a little, richer. I started off by just trying to recreate this as like a gimmick, but I was surprised at how good the results actually look. I chose a few crustier examples of FMV, but if you have great lighting and footage, you can really make a character look like they're in a 3D environment. Take the sequel to Myst, for example, Riven. The FMV footage here looks great. The rim lighting perfectly matches the scene, and look at the shadows. Also, placing the characters behind these bars really helps sell the effect. In the recent Riven remake, they decided to replace these with 3D character models, mostly because they wanted the experience to still look good in VR, but I don't know, that 1997 version just looks better to me. It's aged so well. Also, it's not like FMV games have totally gone away. Sam Barlow makes these excellent FMV games, Her Story and Immortality. While FMV games still have limited interaction, these games just give you a heap of random clips to sort through in order to figure out a narrative or solve a mystery. Compression isn't really an issue anymore too. Take the recent game Road to Empress, which is in 4K and has an insanely high budget for some reason. The studio Remedy also uses FMV footage in conjunction with their games like Control and Alan Wake 2. I keep going back to Remedy as a source of inspiration for interesting video game effects. Their games pull off all these moments that really feel like magic tricks. One effect literally is a magic trick, the Pepper's Ghost illusion, in which you project an image onto a glass plane. Disney uses this a lot in their dark rides like the Haunted Mansion ballroom scene. Remedy uses this as almost like a double exposure effect, where they play live action scenes on top of gameplay, sometimes even on planes in the environment. In Unreal, we can recreate this by, instead of using a standard masked material, we can use an additive material which kind of works like a double exposure, where it's just adding light onto the scene. This only looks good in dark environments with dramatic lighting though. If you were to use this in a game, you would have to set this up like a haunted house, where you have really good control over what the player perspective is, as to not break the illusion. Could be good for a horror game. I think in the future, we might be able to have full 3D FMV characters that you can actually move around in a 3D space thanks to Gaussian splats. With these, we can essentially create a 3D picture using a cloud of particles. The results already look incredible, but to capture footage is a whole nother layer of complexity and data that we're not quite at yet for any practical purposes at least. However, in the latest Superman movie, they did use a full 3D FMV Gaussian splat for this hologram effect. They even did some cool spatial glitch effects to it as well. Maybe once this tech has gotten better, FMV games will have a comeback.
Nobody does it as good as Jeff the Great. And thank you. And thank you. Thank you, especially you.